Hey everybody, Mr. Moonlight here, and it is time for more Alien 3 talk. Yes, last time I defended the rod puppet in Alien 3, but now I'm back to my critiques of why I think this movie is not a good movie. It's not a good sequel, and I think I'm causing some ripples. People are seeing my videos. Not too many people. You know, I don't have high numbers yet. But I have noticed in the communities that people have kind of been posting some stuff in defense of Alien 3 to maybe suggest that, I've ruffled a few feathers. This is one of them that keeps coming up. And it is an old article from VOX from 2017, and I actually thought this is a good one to talk about because this is really kind of indicative of a lot of the defenses of Alien 3 that I find, and they don't really hold much water for me. So we're going to go through it and talk about some of the points to make. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but we're going to I'm going to touch on the points that I read that, a lot of it's just kind of meandering dialogue of an article. Could have been edited down, but I'm going to find the meat of it. We're going to talk about it. And by the way, I apologize if I sound a bit like Spado Delgado when I do these videos. I listen to his stuff a lot and find it very entertaining. So it's easy to kind of fall into his bit. I'm trying to do my own bit. But I also like his kind of casual format to doing videos. So anyway, so Alien 3 is far from the worst Alien movie. In fact, it's pretty great. Okay, pretty great. Director David Fincher famously disowned his own entry into the Alien franchise, but it's actually a showcase for his creative vision. Yeah, I agree with that, but I think his creative vision, his priority versus the priority of making a good movie, he disowned himself from this, and everything I've heard so far from people I know that have firsthand knowledge of the film to interviews I've read with people on the set and that sort of thing is like all the way through this movie. He knew it was a turd, and that's unfortunate. I'm just going to go ahead and say that I think he took the opportunity to do the best job he could, even though he knew things were going south. Anyway, let's scroll down and kind of read through this. So the New Alien Covenant makes the sixth film in the main franchise, which, okay, so that's old news because this is from 2017. Since it started in 1979, making it one of Hollywood's longest running series, and there's no sign of it going away. Director Ridley Scott said in March that there may be as many as 6 more in the works. All right, we'll see how that goes. The franchise has its ups and downs over the years. Remember Aliens vs. Predator Requiem? Requiem nearly killed him. But it has been sustained in large part based on the enduring popularity of the first 2 films in the series, Alien and Aliens. Agree. Yes. That's where the heart of the fandom is. The films were made 7 years apart by 2 different directors, and there isn't much continuity between them. Aside from the protagonist, Sigourney Weaver, Ellen Ripley, and the H.R. Giger design aliens themselves. I completely disagree with this. That's a ridiculous statement. But anyway, let's see what they say. The first was a claustrophobic monster movie in space made by a young director named Ridley Scott. The second, a Vietnam-inspired action film by James Cameron. That does not equal very little continuity between them. What did he say? Very little, a few, whatever. It's right there. You can read it. I've said in another video that I made that absolutely the progression between what Ridley Scott did and what James Cameron did absolutely makes sense. There is complete continuity there, and James Cameron went out of his way to make sure that his sequel serviced what happened in the first story. But let's continue. But both films succeeded on the strength of their memorable imagery, rich world building, and strong performances. And both films helped launch the careers of young directors who would go on to be two of Hollywood's most successful filmmakers. They're classics of science fiction filmmaking, critically acclaimed and beloved by fans, and their reputation has helped the franchise endure for nearly 40 years. Yeah, I mean, we'll go with that. I think James Cameron already had success with Terminator, and Terminator 2 didn't hurt his career either. But yeah, it helped. Other Alien follow-ups haven't fared quite as well. Alien 3 in particular is widely thought of as a turning point in the series. Not a franchise killer, but a disappointment considering what came before. The third installment, which went through a troubled production, was generally panned on its 1992 release, and in the years since, it has been all but disowned by its director, David Fincher. Yes, because I think, like I said, he knew it was a turd even at the time. There was not much he could do about it, but I do believe he felt, I'm going to do the best job I can with this turd. I'm going to make the most of it. And, no one can take that away from him. Absolutely not. So, but this brings me to an interesting point in the article, and this is really where I see kind of a repeating pattern that everybody tries to do. When they try and defend Alien 3, they go into this kind of, but it was a troubled production type thing. And yes, I'm clicking on the trailer just so we can have something visually interesting going on. And most of this article is going to talk about the troubled production. I've said this before. The general audience member does not care about the production. Okay, whenever my wife watches a movie and I watch the behind the scenes, she does not watch the behind the scenes. She doesn't care. She's in the story. She's invested in the movie. She sits down, she watches it. When it's over, she moves on with her day. If it makes sense to her, great. If it doesn't make sense to her, then, that's all that matters. She's not going to go digging and going, why didn't this make sense? Is there additional material I can read to make? No. Anyway, but this is the defense that a lot of the people who want to say that Alien 3 is a good movie go to its production. And so anyway, let's kind of scroll through here. Let's see. Alien 3 may not have quite the mass appeal. No, that's absolutely true. Or enduring legacy of its predecessors, but its low reputation simply isn't deserved. Disagree. It's a worthy addition to the franchise. Disagree. As strong a science fiction picture, nope, in its own way, as the first two films in the series. Nope. And another showcase of the visionary talent of a young director who would go on to be one of the most powerful filmmakers in Hollywood. Yes, he nearly quit films and went back to music videos, but yeah, kudos to him. He has his style, he has his brand, and he has his fan following, and good for him. I'm not one of them. I don't like his films generally. I don't think it's because they're bad films. As a matter of fact, I will go out of my way to point out that as far as how he crafts his movies, he is an exceptional talent. But his priorities, his worldview, and his focus, I don't know what else to say, his subject matters, his themes, none of those appeal to me, and he's never been successful in entertaining me or keeping me engaged. I'll go into that a bit more. Alien 3's troubled production was a trial by fire for a young David Fincher. Yes, over and over again. This is what Alien 3 fans always go to this. Like Alien 3 took a long time. It took a long time to gestate. Through the previous films, had been a huge success. Director James Cameron had moved on. Blah 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 blah. Still, the studio wanted a sequel, so work eventually began on development story. Project Troubled. Fincher came on board. According to Wreckage and Rage, the making of Alien 3. Have I seen this movie? Is Wreckage and Rage the Alien 3 BTS on the quadrilogy pack? Is that what they call it? Because I've watched that many times. I actually find it very interesting and very entertaining. I'll watch that, but I've given up on watching Alien 3. And I've watched Alien 3, both the original cut and the assembly cut, many times. And heard about, with the DVD, the behind the scenes talked about, Rennie Harlin, who isn't a bad director. He wouldn't have been my choice for Alien 3. Let's see, the development process went much further until writer Vincent Ward proposed a movie about a monk-like society on a planet-sized wooden ship floating in space. Skip. He exited the project. Fincher came in on board. I'm glad they didn't go with the wooden thing in space, because it's just, that's like weird. It's like something they might be able to pull off in Star Wars, but, it really doesn't have any place in kind of the utilitarian setting of Alien. At the time, Fincher was in his late 20s. It's very young to be, I don't know. People do films in their 20s, I guess. But I'm in my early 40s now, and I still feel too young to be making a movie. And although he was well known for his music video work, he had never directed a feature film. His on-set perfectionism grated on the producers who felt he was wasting too much time and money getting small details right. The relationship between the young director and his studio minders was tense at best. And yes, you know what? Okay, if you're on your first film and you're a new film director, music videos are a different animal. They're shorter. You don't have to focus so much on story. They are very much just kind of like visual showcases where movies are stories. And if you are focusing on the visual showcase at the expense of the story or expense of, the producers who are going to want to see some results, I could see how there's tension there. But here's something I'll never forget: David's complete devotion to The Color of Blood. Okay, you gotta work this out ahead of time. Maybe you didn't have time to do it, but again, this movie had much bigger issues than The Color of Blood. So let's skip ahead. Swerdlow describes Fincher as openly contemptuous of studio oversight and says the studio responded by trying to break him. So, not a good relationship there. Certainly, I kind of sympathize with the studio. If you're working with someone and they are treating you with contempt, that's not a good working relationship, and that certainly isn't. Anyway, I don't know. That's one person's point of view. So it may be that they were just treating him badly and he just had enough. So, but we went through this production continually, reworking the script. Producer John Landau says in the documentary, the movie got green light based on a whole different version of the script, and David had to deal with that in a very short period of time. Okay, so really, again, this doesn't matter. I'm not ripping apart David Fincher. I'm ripping apart Alien 3. And it's the finished product. God bless David Fincher. And again, his success, and I think he's very talented. But all of this stuff is kind of like, it's apologist stuff. It's, it doesn't matter. If someone goes to see Alien 3 after seeing the first two Aliens and they're going like, what the hell is this? They're not, no one's going to be there to start explaining, well, it's this and that. It doesn't matter. What matters is what the film does speaking for itself. Now, a longer cut of the film validates the strength of Fincher's creative vision. I do not see this. We're going to go through this a little bit, but I find the assembly cut meandering and boring, and it does not add anything else to the story except for, again, meandering. additional scenes that don't do anything for the story. More than a decade later, it's clear that the feelings remain raw. Fincher is the only major player who does not appear in Wreckage and Rage, and the studio initially demanded that the documentary makers cut 20 minutes of the film detailing conflicts with the director. When the studio wanted to assemble a director's cut of Alien 3 for a home video release, Fincher refused to participate. Instead, an extended cut of the film was created based on his editing room notes, a kind of director's cut without the director. The assembly cut is, as it is known, restores much of what was lost in the studio's shortened version of the movie and solves some of the specific problems cited by critics. Did the critics cite that the movie wasn't boring enough? Among other things, it extends the world of the prison planet Fiorina 161 by reinserting a series of exteriors intended to appear in the beginning of the film, showing the residents using ox to pull wreckage through the bleak industrial landscape. So what? The ox ends up being something that the alien bursts out of, but it already burst out of a dog, and that made more sense to me. It's like, oh, we've got an ox instead of a dog. Well, so what? The dog was more interesting. And a dog alien running around is, just, I don't know, it just seems to match up a little more than an ox alien. These shots help establish what life is like in the planet, set the tone of the film to come, and address complaints that the world of the film doesn't feel all that large. I thought you were going for claustrophobia. No, the world of the film doesn't need to feel that large, because even if you expand it, nothing happens outside of that expansion. I just don't need to know what life is like meandering around dark hallways with prisoners that all have the same personality. And they do all have the same personality, pretty much. The only people who have standout personalities are the ones that actually have to have constant interaction with Ripley, which is Clemens and Aaron and Dylan. Little bits here and there, but everyone else, the lines could be interchangeable, and I think they even might be, because I can't tell anybody apart. The assembly cut also dramatically expands the roles of several of the prisoner characters, particularly Gallic, a stuttering murderer played by Paul McGann, whose part was all but eliminated from the studio version of the film. Yeah, and again, in the assembly cut, and by the way, spoilers, they actually do capture the alien, and then he lets it out again, wah wah, and then he dies. In the time you see Gallic, his character changes. It might have been interesting if they would have said, hey, he's got multiple personalities or something like that. But even in the assembly cut, it doesn't really explain that. It just explains that for some reason, this guy suddenly thinks that this thing is, sent by, I don't know, God, the devil, whatever. I don't even care. And it doesn't make any difference to the story, because it's just, that story ends as soon as he lets him out and gets killed, and then it's not relevant ever again. But mostly assembly cut serves to validate the strength of Fincher's vision, a vision that shines through even in the studio cut. Okay, if it shines through in the studio cut, then why do we need to validate it? Alien 3 is more than anything else a dark and dour mood piece about the ugly depths of the human condition. Stop it with this humans are all bad bull. It's old, it's tiresome, and it was prevalent through the 90s. I'm a child. I was a teenager in the 90s, okay, and there was a lot of cool stuff going on in the 90s, and a lot of it was kind of like ruined by this stupid. Anyway, the assembly cut basks in that mood a little longer. I hate that mood. and adds more detail around the margins, but there's no missing it in the theatrical release version of the film either. So why do we need to like focus on the margins? They don't have anything to do with the story. In some sense, critics who praise the look but pan the movie miss the point. In a David Fincher film, the mood is the movie. Sorry, I'm doing that Spotto Delgado thing again. Sorry, Spotto. Maybe in a David Fincher film, the mood is the movie, but this is an Alien film, and in Alien films and pretty much every other film that is enjoyable or entertaining, the story is the movie. The mood is an ingredient to enhance that story in some way. If you want to do a mood piece, again, music videos are the place to do that. If you are David Fincher and you have a David Fincher audience, and that's what they're showing up for, great. But we were showing up for an Alien film. We were showing up for a continuation of the story arc that had been established in the first two movies, and we wanted an actual story that serviced that, not serviced David Fincher, not serviced a specific David Fincher audience, which at the time there was none. Alien 3 is very much a David Fincher film. Okay, I already commented on that. As distinctly the product of his dark and twisted imagination as Seven or Zodiac or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. All movies that could not hold my attention. As well crafted as they were. Just as the icy survivalism of Alien helped set the tone of Ridley Scott's career, and the guns blazing ferocity of Aliens helped pave the way for James Cameron's later work, Alien 3 works as a setup for the rest of David Fincher's films. And again, we're not servicing David Fincher here, we're servicing Alien 3. But anyway, it's a nihilistic and misanthropic, bleak and despairing, sickly shot and bathed in ragged industrial gloom. Screw nihilism. I hate misanthropic bull. Bleak and despairing, sickly shot and bathed in ragged industrial gloom. All of this is just nonsense. Oh, it's so dark and it's like you go to an art gallery and it's existential but so accessible. That's actually a line from Elf. But it's, they just throw these words out there. I mean, nihilistic, all right. People try and argue that the first Alien was nihilist. No, I addressed that in my other video. It's a man versus nature. And someone does survive. Misanthropic, like, okay, when you're creating something that's misanthropic, you're essentially saying to your audience, I hate you. Like, why do we, like, and we're going to talk about that. There's another video I have planned about Newt's autopsy, which addresses specifically the misanthropic attitude of Alien 3. And David Fincher has said in an interview, he thinks all people are perverts, and he's based his entire career around that. I'm not sure what his definition of pervert is. I think, people use that as a broad stroke. It's like, hey, if you're a man and you're attracted to a woman, oh, you're a pervert. No, that's human nature, all right? If you want, if you're curious, if you want a story told, people go, oh, you're voyeuristic, and that's perverted, no. So I don't know what his definition of perverts is, but if you're telling your audience you think they're all perverts, it's a very zero-sum attitude towards human beings. Making mistakes or being attracted to people, and maybe flubbing, making a pass at them in a bar or something does not make you a pervert. So telling people that they are your audience, that they're perverts, and you're making a film for perverts, and no, we're not showing up for a film for perverts. We're showing up because we like story and we like the story so far, and we don't want to be shamed for liking the story so far and shown that story stepped on. But anyway, let's move on. It's a big budget movie about human frailty and the inevitability of death, in which the characters are never particularly likable or heroic, and the protagonist dies at the end. Again, no, none of these characters are likable. And why would we want to spend, money and that time trying to identify or sympathize with characters that aren't likable? That's story death. People show up to be able to kind of attach themselves to a character and live some sort of experience through that story. I certainly don't want to live the experience of being an unlikable a-hole, and I'm well aware that at some point we all got to go. I certainly don't want to show up to a film to be told like, hey, this adventure that you've been on, this kind of fight for survival, where we're just going to show you that really it doesn't matter, and everyone dies, and don't even bother because they're all going to die. And it diminishes Ripley's sacrifice at the end, by the way. I died to save other people who were just going to die anyway. Anyway, going back to the article. As in Seven, the ending is a shock downer. It's not a shock. We know the entire time she's got a chest burster in her, and the entire movie was a downer, so no shock there. As in Fight Club, the character relationships are built from a series of existential dialogue. It's existential, but it's accessible. Anyway, as in Panic Room, the story is driven by the need to use one's surroundings to survive what is essentially a home invasion. The alien of Alien 3, in a way, is Fincher's first serial killer. Again, not about Fincher. We didn't show up for a serial killer movie. And this, again, I think I addressed this in another video. The alien runs around killing people at random, and it just becomes about the kills. In the first Alien movie, each death propels the story. Each death creates a need for action. And in the second movie, the same thing applies. Each death is presented in a way that wraps up the character arc and the theme of that character. Vasquez and Gorman, I talk about in another video, is the standout example aside from the obvious main characters. Fincher put his own particular stamp on the tropes that animate the Alien franchise. Fincher's perfectionism on the set of Alien 3 would become the norm for the director. Reports indicate that while making Gone Girl, he averaged more than 50 takes per scene. Oh my goodness, that must have been a hellish set for everyone. I know Stanley Kubrick did the same thing. But I've seen interviews with Kubrick's editors saying, like, usually we use the third or fourth take. His fascination with violence and gore that is both artful and shocking would appear later in Seven and Zodiac. In all these films, Fincher's obsession with the look of blood comes across clearly on screen. Again, I don't like... Okay, fake blood is not that hard, all right? But again, let's point this out again. They're just calling out all these different movies. This article isn't about how good Alien 3 is. This article is about David Fincher, which is fine. You can like David Fincher, but nothing here talks about why Alien 3 is good. And they've been dancing around it by talking about all his other movies and never really addressing all the big problems with the story or how it completely disregards in a disrespectful way what came before it. And by the way, have I mentioned this before? I gotta say, like, I am sure that James Cameron at some point has been like, guys, what the hell? Like, I built you this beautiful thing, and I realized that it'd be hard to go from there to top. But if you're going to do it, you need to try a little harder. Don't just go like, hey, like, it's like you created this like beautiful Fabergé egg and handed it over to the next incarnation, and they went like, hey, this is a beautiful Fabergé egg, And, now we're going to go postmodern and smash it and say that that is that is as valid a movie as anything else. Boy, I apologize for coming across so angry. Again, I'm not trying to spite fans of Alien 3. It is okay to like this movie. There is a lot to like about it, but I don't like it, and I've been told for years that I'm wrong to not like it, and I've been told for years that I'm wrong to think that there is value to aliens. So, I'm sticking up for the first two movies, and I'm telling you, this is where it all went wrong. Visually, Alien 3 may be the most distinctive entry in the franchise. What does that even mean? The most distinctive. Cinematographer Jordan Cronenworth, whose work on Blade Runner defined a certain decaying urban sci-fi aesthetic, it's so edgy, had to quit after a short time on the job. I think that was due to health issues. But the final work with British photographer Alex Thompson is stunning in its own way. Backgrounds are textured with steam columns, damp surface, and sharp beams of light that give the set a texture. Physically, for much of the film, the camera lingers close to the floor, pointed up as if to emphasize the close confines of the prison space and the impossibility of escape. Okay, I will absolutely validate that. I think they did a great job with the cinematography. There is stuff in the behind the scenes about the work with a cinematographer, and if you are a filmmaker, especially a cinematography fan and a lens geek, like many filmmakers are, you're going to gush about this. Again, the audience doesn't care if the story isn't there. Didn't mean for that to rhyme. But yeah. If you're a filmmaker, especially if you're a filmmaker or a fan of special effects like I am, there is a lot to gush over about this movie and just geek out about. But we're not making movies for film geeks. We're never making movies for film geeks. There are times I've used the general After Effects lens flare on something. You're like, oh, that's the After Effects lens flare. Why'd you go with that? It's like, I needed a lens flare. I wasn't going to go buy a lens flare pack. And the people who watch these movies that aren't filmmakers will never notice. It'll be fine. We're not making movies for film geeks. We are making movies of quality. Of course, we always want to make sure we make the best quality possible, because your audience will notice when the quality isn't there. But yes, the cinematography was awesome. Beyond the visuals, Alien 3 also excels as an exercise in imaginative world building. No, I can find this movie to be so unimaginative. It adds nothing to the Alien franchise. You have an alien running around that's a little more dog-like. We already saw in Aliens that the alien can vary in look from the first film. That's fine. But imagination, tell me what's imaginative about this movie. What does it expand? They wanted to go back to one alien. All right. Because why? Because there was one alien in the first movie and they loved the first movie, and the first movie was scary. Well, this movie wasn't scary. And, we certainly weren't introduced to any new elements in the way that Alien introduced us to the space jockey, or the aliens introduced us to the queen. Anyway, it's a lonely prison planet. It's Lonely Prison Planet is as richly detailed and lived in an environment as the industrial quarters of Alien or the abandoned mining colony of Aliens. It's a bunch of people shaved bald standing around in really dirty hallways. There's nothing more than that, It's a sequestered society in which a religious contingent effectively runs the prison, while a small group of overseers struggle to maintain a facade of control. Is as nuanced and cinematic socially as the corporate power structures that drove the first film, or the military conventions that powered the second. Like its predecessors, Alien 3 is the exploration of human power dynamic in a confined setting and the limits of Institutional control. It's so socially relevant. But it doesn't matter. Like it's a what do they call it? A shaggy dog. Like it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't, it's a big so what. Fincher, in other words, puts his own particular stamp on the tropes that animated the Alien franchise. Didn't they say that already? He took the ideas that Scott and Cameron had developed. Actually, Scott didn't develop those ideas on his own. Big props to all the writers involved in Alien, H.R. Giger. And Cameron had developed and remade them in his own image. He didn't remake them. He progressed them. He had his own style, but he also worked very hard to make sure that it stayed visually. He maintained a visual continuity, story logic that continued on. His ideas may be too bleak, too gloomy, too misanthropic for some. For a lot of people, okay, we're tired of the bleak and gloomy. Everyone dies. It's not why we show up for the movies. And if you are showing up to the movies because you like to be reminded that or told that you're an awful person and nothing matters, then maybe stop and look at how happy are you? Are you happy? Do you argue with people a lot? Do people around you seem to maybe get a little sick of you because you're a downer? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. Like I said, there's some movies that I think are successfully bleak, but they give you something for it. You show up, you leave with something a little extra. This didn't give me anything. And in Alien 3, they are presented as forcefully as ever. Yes, they are crammed down your throat constantly. The movie becomes more about that than any actual reason that we showed up. Fincher's frustrating experience on the film and his perfectionism may not allow him to see it, but it's a fine David Fincher film. Maybe, again, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a fan of David Fincher's films. Again, it's not because I think he's a bad filmmaker or he doesn't have something to say. I'm just not interested in what he has to say. And much like the assembly cut, do we address the assembly cut? I find the assembly cut boring. It doesn't add anything to the film. But this is David Fincher fans. And that's what I really want to conclude. So just as Alien and Aliens were unmistakable products of the director's ideas and aesthetics, Alien 3 is the product of Fincher's unique vision, and that, in the end, is what makes it a great Alien film as well. No. This is... Okay. Let's go back for a second. Alien is not an unmistakable product of the director's ideas and aesthetics. Alien is where the unmistakable ideas of Dan O'Bannon, H.R. Giger, and Ridley Scott, and some great actors, they all came together and they worked to service this story and make it the best possible story. Ultimately, Ridley Scott had the final call, but I think he really did work to service the script, and he really did work to service H.R. Giger's vision. He saw the merits in them, and he was excited about them, and he wanted to bring them to life. And that is why Alien was successful. Aliens was successful because James Cameron was really excited about what Ridley Scott had done, and he had a very strong idea of how to take that world and expand it, expand the story into that world, continue the story logic, continue an aesthetic that looks like it matches, even though it was, yes, James Cameron has his own style, but it did fit in pretty seamlessly with what Ridley Scott had created. Alien 3 seemed to be like these are some good ideas, but I think you're just going in the wrong direction, and let me show you what happens when we kind of like take these beautifully crafted things and break them apart and just show the parts and go, here, audience, look look at what you loved. It's all broken and it's all scattered everywhere, just like everything in life. And you're all perverts, and I hate humanity, the misanthropic, nihilistic, blah, blah, blah. And that is not a successful sequel. That is not even a successful movie. David Fincher was not happy with how this movie turned out. And yes, there are a lot of David Fincher elements in there that he went and turned into his own film career, which has a fan following that they love and they want. But those are successful to David Fincher, and they're successful to his audience. And what I think is happening here is there are a lot of David Fincher fans that are having a lot of trouble with the fact that David Fincher's first outing was not a success, and that it essentially did take a big turd on what should have been a great trilogy and a great conclusion to a story arc. And so they are going to defend it. They're going to justify it. As we see from this VOX article, we are, we're not talking about Alien 3. We're talking about David Fincher. We're talking about his other movies. We're talking about all of that. So it's kind of like a David Fincher apology thing going on here. Also, I think, like I said, I made a video which has the least hits of all why I think people are pretending to like Alien 3. I think there are a lot of people who they loved 1 and 2, and they desperately wanted to love Alien 3. I wanted to love Alien 3 and make that, in their minds be like, no, it's the end. It's the perfect end to the trilogy. No, it didn't take a tremendous nosedive. I need this fantasy, we see it. And look, I'm going to ruffle a lot of feathers here too, but I see the same thing happening with Disney Star Wars as well. Although The Mandalorian does look pretty cool. But, I think a lot of this is people just trying to go like, no, I had such high hopes. I needed these movies to be good so bad. I'm going to now put myself into a Stockholm Syndrome sense of denial that these movies are good so that I can continue, because I want to give Disney my money. I want more Star Wars movies, and maybe they'll come up with one more movie that'll rectify everything, and I'll feel, no, I'm sorry. Like, look, it's a lot of these franchises, unless some miracle, some genius thing happens. The Alien franchise, and I'd love to see the Alien franchise go back to form, but these Alien and Aliens were, not too far apart in time for sequel. They're products of their time, and this is things Star Wars, Star Trek, Indiana Jones, they're products of their time. I think the reason that the Marvel movies are doing so well, they're products of their time right now. I'm going to do a video on Marvel movies, by the way, because I know why they are so beloved, and I hear a lot of the complaints about them. And anyway, that's another video. I think I can justify the Marvel movies in a way that you'll all like. But these movies are products of their time. So when it's like 40 years later and we're still trying to make Aliens movies, we're still trying to make Star Wars movies, and we're going, why aren't these working? It's because you can't take a movie that is a product of its time and try and update it or shoehorn your, what you think are like new great modern ideas. Anyway, this video has gone on really long, so thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I got to get back to work. I've been working nonstop on my movie, The Quantum Terror, to the point where I'm making these videos just to kind of break the monotony of what the visual effects thing is. I haven't talked to friends that we used to talk to weekly in months. I'm wondering if they're okay. And we got a move coming up. And so, these can all be just, you can blow all this off as the crazed ramblings of a lunatic mind who has been locked in his office way too long, making films, and really needs a change. But VOX, thanks for this article. Thanks for posting it, guys. And I have now destroyed it.